Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast. On this week's Sportlight Podcast, we're going to address abuse with Dr. Sheldon Martin. We're going to talk about how coaches and parents and fellow teammates could help people who may be experiencing this horrible thing in their life.
Welcome to the Sportlight Podcast for parents, coaches, and athletes. The Sportlight refers to the time in an athlete's life when they have increased ability to affect the culture around them and the increased opportunity to learn life's lessons through sports. This podcast aims to help parents and coaches capitalize on their athletes' precious time in the Sportlight. The Sportlight Podcast is brought to you by Especially for Athletes program.
Hey, Sheldon, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for taking time with us and addressing this really important topic of abuse. So a while back, you and I in a conversation, you said, hey, I would love to have an opportunity sometime to talk about the role that coaches and parents and fellow athletes of young people might play in helping to protect children, to prevent abuse, and help those who've experienced abuse to heal. And so first off, just first question, why did it come to your mind to think of coaches and parents of athletes and fellow teammates when it came to this topic of abuse?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. When you back up and look at, what is abuse, right? And when we look in society, people will use different definitions and it can become a very unique conversation when we're not even using the same definition. But when you really identify and say abuse is the mistreatment or neglect of others in ways that causes harm, whether that's physically, emotionally, or sexually, usually the conversation changes and everyone, yes, like that should not happen. And when children or athletes and young people, teenagers, if they are the victim of abuse, they will often, if they find the courage to tell someone, they'll tell someone they trust. And that can be a coach. And that it can also be a parent if it is happening outside of the home. And so because coaches and parents are in these very important roles where they may be the one that the youth talks to, the person talks to, the athlete speaks with the first time, I think it's helpful that we know how to respond.
Yeah, I love what you said, because I know looking throughout my life, some of the most trusted people in my life were the Kent Bothwells, the Gary Phelps, the Bill Paxtons. I'm grateful that I was brought up in such a way that I never experienced abuse. But I think if I ever were to experience those things in my own home or something like that, I knew I had trusted adults. And these coaches of these athletes are often some of the most trusted people in their life, especially if they're having a tough time at home. Can I ask you a question just to kind of lead off here? You said they'll often tell a coach or a parent, and I want to throw in here maybe a teammate's parent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Or a teammate,
right?
Mm-hmm.
They're at someone else's house and they have a tough home life and they always like to visit their friend and their family. And then they get to know those parents, and then those parents become a trusted adult in their life. And that happens very frequently with teams as well. But you said that they want to tell somebody. What does research show? Like, because sometimes it doesn't seem often that a teenager will come and just walk up to an adult and say, I am being abused, right?
Right.
And so they might be more subtle about it and just kind of almost gauge, how is this person willing to help me, kind of a thing. What would coaches expect? How would a player approach a coach? I'm sure there's a variety of ways, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, they would. Many times an athlete would try to give a hint. They're afraid to tell someone many times. And they might make a comment like, man, I hate it when I have to go home after practice. Right. That very, very simple statement. That doesn't mean that athlete is being abused. But I think it's an indicator where a coach may say, "Why? What's up?" You don't have to go too far down the road. We're just saying they're feeling it out. Say, "Why? What's going on?" Right? And if they feel that this person's going to listen to me, they may share a little bit more. That's often how they will introduce a topic. They'll announce kind of an environment and say, "Oh, it's not how it is for me," or "I don't want to go back there." And I suppose, because this does happen, it could be the same way if your child is at home and with practice, and not because, "Oh, it's just a hard practice and we're running a lot," but there are situations that come up in a locker room, or it's horrific, but that happen between coaches and players. And if the child is kind of saying, I don't know, I don't want to go there, and that's a little bit of a shock to you, it's important to kind of say, "Why? Just tell me more. What's going on?"
Yeah.
Right. That's how they feel it out most of the time.
Yeah. Even little comments, maybe, if I'm understanding you correctly, like, "Oh man, my coach kind of creeps me out." That might be, they're begging for that question, like, why? Why does your coach creep you out? That's really, really good. So what are some of there are those times where players will come to a coach or to their parent or the parent of one of their teammates and say something like that. And if I am hearing you correctly, it's just the simple thing to do is not overreact, not do anything like that, but just maybe ask some more questions. Like, "Tell me about that. Why do they creep you out?" Or, "Hey, why are you hesitant to go home?" And then have a conversation, make sure that all is well. Is there any other things that you would have our coaches maybe look for? What else? How else can we identify when this might be happening in a kid's life?
Yeah. So if you notice a sudden, just immediate change in an athlete's life, when I say their mood changes, it's so drastic that you take notice, right? Mm-hmm. It's not they're just in a bad mood or they're lazy that day. You really take notice, like, "Whoa, that doesn't seem like Johnny, right? That doesn't seem like Kelly." It's just it's sharp. That is an indicator that there's something traumatic that's happened in someone's life, often abuse. That would be one. If there are behaviors that you notice around an individual that are a little, it makes you a little suspicious, things like giving really special treatment, giving high value gifts, telling, if you hear of threats of someone saying, "No one's going to believe you if you do that," that is a very toxic relationship, regardless of what is happening. And that should be kind of a red flag. And so if there was another adult involved that was giving real special attention to one of your athletes, it should cause a little bit of curiosity to say, "Hey, you know what? Why'd you buy him new cleats? Like, what's going on there?" No one else on the team, right? You didn't do that if that were like a coach, for example. Or if a parent is insistent on being involved and around at a point, not just to be an overprotective parent and wants their child to have more playing time type thing, but they don't want that child to be alone with other adults for the potential of sharing something. Those are things to kind of look for, right? If it's a little bit off to you, just trust your instinct on that one, because many times something is off.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's definitely times where you have charitable, wonderful people, for example, with a less fortunate kid who buys them new cleats. And that's not what you're
No,
talking about. You're talking
that's
about
right.
this extraordinary attention that seems to be given. Because I have a lot of compassion for coaches, especially high school coaches. You know, they don't get paid a lot to coach their high school teams. And then they form their staff with people who are willing to basically volunteer to be high school coaches or whatever it might be, whatever level there. And so what you're saying right now might be very valuable for a coach, because no head coach, for example, would want on their watch one of their assistants to abuse one of their players or something like that. And then, so that might be very helpful in that setting, to even to have a coach like, just, hey, I just want to talk to you about something. Do you understand how much attention you're paying to so-and-so? You know, it might be even just questioning the optics of it could have someone who may have some things in mind pull back. You know, like, I don't know if you know what this looks like, but this is what it looks like. And this is, you're giving some people this impression. And some might be offended by that, but way better than having it go to the other end if that's where it could have gone.
Absolutely. It's a good preventative practice. And I know, Shad, you know, you and I have been around sports our whole lives, and I know that the coaches are asked so much. I mean, they just volunteer their time and ask so much. But there's a couple of good rules to have. It's not good to have any adult coach and player alone, right? I mean, even if nothing happened, but if someone makes an accusation, then they're both vulnerable, right? And so a group of players with a position coach, okay, right? I mean, it just adds protection to your coaches, or it's an open field, everyone can see. But if you have situations where you have coaches alone with one player a lot, that just puts everyone at a very vulnerable spot. So I would just organize, you know, training sessions, practices in a way that no accusation or no behavior is going to be isolated and alone, or in an open space where not everyone can see. I think that's a good thing to do. So you could have some pretty clear rules that would be helpful. Coach, don't touch the players. Oh, I was just showing them how to get down on a ground ball. Yeah, just stand in front of them and demonstrate, model it. Just it's not a good practice to touch players, right? I mean, and to physically adjust and to move. It's not good for coaches to be alone with players, right? I hate to use this example, but it was a pretty clear one. We learned that with the U.S. gymnastics team, right? The young ladies going in there felt like, oh, it's the doctor. This is what I'm supposed to do for my rehab, right? If other people were in the room, it would have been another level of protection, right? It would have just been a safer environment for young athletes. If there are excessive private communications, you know, teams can communicate through group texts or multiple messages, but a lot of one-on-one interaction and dialogue, that should be a little bit of a red flag. Even if it's not at a level of abusive, it's at minimum inappropriate, right? For an adult, it's not the parent, they're a coach, just excessive communication to a young athlete alone or privately. It's a little bit of a red flag, right? That the parent at minimum should be involved. And so I think those are kind of some things to look for, to make sure that the isolation is not occurring, and that physical touch is not the standard in coaching sports, and then the excessive time and all those things. I think that would be the advice that I would give.
Yeah, often with youth in whatever capacity, even with church groups, the Boy Scouts of America, you know, there's that too deep leadership, right? Just that safety that comes from from having multiple adults there. And that's super, super helpful. Sheldon, some people may be hesitant because we live in a day and an age where you are guilty until proven innocent sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that could lead to some people feeling a hesitancy to even have a conversation with people about these things, or a young person might feel a hesitancy when they feel like, man, something's going on with my teammate, and they worry that it might be an abusive situation of any type. There might be this hesitancy to report or to talk with or to address. I'm sure we all feel that in these situations. Would you speak to that for a second? What would you say to those who may be aware of a situation that something's just sitting wrong with them, with a player on their team, or a teammate of one of our children, or a teammate of, for our young people, one of their teammates? And they just sense something's wrong, but they're so afraid to have that awkward conversation, so they don't. What would you say to that?
Yeah, well, the first thing, it's never wrong to just ask someone directly, right? And you can do it in a way, you don't have to say abuse. You can, but maybe you could just say, hey, listen, it seems like something's off. Is everything okay? At home or at school, is everything all right? Are you safe? And if they say, yeah, coach, I'm sorry, I'm failing calculus, and I don't know how to, it's just affecting my whole life. Okay, great. I mean, either way, you're going to get kind of probably a pretty good answer, right?
Yeah.
And yes, they have the opportunity maybe to not tell the full truth, but you're asking very directly.
You've opened a door.
You've opened the door.
Like if it, like they know, okay, you've opened up this line of, even if they don't react awesomely the first time or share everything the first time or whatever, they at least know that there's now this door open if they ever need to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But then I would at another level, I would never once dismiss a report of abuse. That should be the standard. If an athlete comes to you and says, my dad is doing X, you need to take that seriously and report it. A lot of people feel like, oh, but if I report, like, what about this or what about that? When you look at the statistics of it, especially in our society, I mean, you really do have to have evidence. You really do. It's going to have to be something that is happening for it to move down the road, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. There are times when people have made reports to DCFS, and they make them often, and there's nothing there, and it just kind of dies off, and that happens. That happens often, and it's something where I think many people feel that like there's going to be a celebrity smear campaign or something against them, and the reality is with youth and youth sports, and that's just not how it works. If someone reports abuse to you, you need to report it. And the folks that will look at that and take serious, many times the report will come in and there's just there's nothing there. There's nothing they can do. And so I wouldn't want coaches and adults and parents to feel like they needed to be the filter, right? That let me see, is he telling the truth? Is he right? Because they can go through that filter. They don't want to be wrong about that, and the good folks that really do investigate these things, they do a great job, and there really has to be something there for them to pursue it. So I don't think you need to worry about ruining someone's life unintentionally, because I'll tell you, Shad, there's a worse scenario where someone doesn't report it because they don't want to ruin a dad's life. And the athlete, the child, they're still hanging on to it when they're in their 30s and 40s because no one called.
Yeah.
And that's the worst case, right?
Yeah. And if I hear you correctly, Sheldon, like, of course, if we see outright abuse, you just report it.
You report it. That's right.
But we're also talking about, I think, just reporting it off of a whim and to avoid a conversation might not be, where what I mean is you're suspecting, is there something going on in that home? Is there,
Yep.
I think it would be a good idea to at least have as a practice be, hey, can I talk to you for a second?
Yep.
I'll be honest, I am worried about you. Is everything okay at home? And I've seen bruises on you, or I've seen you down a lot lately, or and I've noticed that you don't like going home. You've made comments about that. Are you okay? Are you safe at home? Or you see a kid even emaciated, that sometimes it's not even on purpose, but I've dealt in my career with a few kids who parents have had some serious drug issues, and all the money in the house was going to feed that habit, and not much of it was going toward feeding the children, and so it might be someone, looking skinny, emaciated, or whatever it might be. Having a conversation, I think, is a important thing to do. And we aren't talking about just going into a baseball game being like, hey, that kid doesn't look at his dad very much. I'll call DCFS.
Right. That's not what we're talking about.
We're talking about these situations where we have felt something's wrong. Yeah. And it's good to have that conversation. And then if we suspect or learn from that, don't be afraid to report it, and definitely don't hide it. A parent who's done something like that to their child, or, a fellow coaching staff member that's done that to their wife, they don't need protection. They need consequences. They need, like, those people who've been abused are the ones.
The victim needs protection.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good summary. If you suspect something, ask someone directly. Like, right? If I called you, as my brother, I'm like, Shad, is everything okay? Are you safe? Right? That's only kind. I don't think people take that as judgmental, right? Like, even if there wasn't anything going on, I think it's a good thing to do. If you have someone report it to you, tell you, you need to report it. You need to tell the authorities. That's your obligation as a citizen. Yeah. Right. It's not your job to carry the weight of it. They told you, report it. And then if you witness it, yes, absolutely. Report it. I think that's a good kind of umbrella framework to say, okay, that we can do that in our sports program.
And I think this is so important. We have, for example, not that this never happens to young men. That's not what I'm saying at all. But, we have young women, these coaches who coach young women. And, there is sometimes this danger of sexual assault and things like that happen, or over controlling, meaning like stalking type situations of boyfriends and things like that. And there are coaches who may witness things that are concerning. So take me to that situation. Let's say it's a girls basketball coach, girls softball coach. And I'm not implying that this could never happen to young men or anything like that. And they see that situation where they just view a very unhealthy relationship, between a girl and a boy or something like that. Of course, everything we've talked about right now may apply. Is there anything you would add to that particular situation that coaches, parents, teammates might look for?
Yeah, I think so. So unfortunately, here would be a scenario that should be a red flag for a coach. A teenage boyfriend showing up to a teenage girls practice and being controlling about that space, controlling about what time she goes to practice and dropping her off late, or being there and being upset that they're not done with practice and wanting her to leave with him, or, yelling at each other when they get into the car. Those are behaviors that at 16, 17, 14, 15, right? They just should not be occurring. It's way too much control. And a young man, for example, that is excessively controlling in that way, which may not sound like it's excessively controlling, but when you put it at the age group, it is, right? They're trying to manage their schedule, their time, their hobbies. That is a very can be a very dangerous situation.
Well, even the team's getting together, but so-and-so's never there because she's always,
yes,
her boyfriend gets mad at her. And of course, this might not be something where you say, okay, that's it, I'm calling the police. This kid won't let the girl come to a team party. But it's one of those eyes up, do the work situation where you recognize something and a coach is in a trusted position to be able to say, hey, can I talk to you about something? A few of us have noticed something and we would like to bring it to your attention and see what you're feeling, make sure you're okay. Because I think some kids, they're so immature that they don't even realize that that's not a normal relationship.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oftentimes in high school, for sure, it's their first relationship. So they're not sure what normal is.
Right.
But as adults, right, we can notice some behaviors that like, whoa, like that, you should not be carrying that level of emotional weight in a relationship at 16. Yeah. And we could be a real protection and help in that area. So that would be definitely a red flag where I would talk to the player at minimum.
Players' parents, probably.
Players' parents. Absolutely.
Hey, I'm just seeing something. It's concerning me. I don't know if it's concerning you or not, but this is just something that's a little bit concerning that I've seen, and then tell them some of the behaviors that you may have seen that are concerning.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Sheldon, thanks. I know this isn't like the most bubbly of all topics, and in no way in doing this topic did we say, okay, we want to do this because a bunch of coaches are abusing kids. It's actually our incredible coaches donate so much time and energy to these kids, and the kids know they love them and they're in positions of trust. And so having just a conversation about this, man, maybe with all the people who listen to this and all the coaches we talk to, especially for athletes, if a coach hears this and thinks, and then a player comes to mind that they've been seeing some of these things we've been talking about and they're able to address it, that would be so helpful. And we know that these coaches are in an incredible position of trust and have a lot of power that they could use for good to help kids when they're in the most difficult of situations. So thank you. Any last words you would say, anything on your mind that maybe you were hoping to say that I didn't ask you?
I've had a few private conversations with coaches that have been towards the end of their career, and there are highlights, right, in any career. And some of those are players that played for you and they went on to do great things in athletics or great things, in their studies and career, or they grew a ton and became a wonderful person. But I'm amazed at how many also reflect on one of the greatest things they felt they could accomplish was that they were able to protect a child who really needed a strong, competent adult to be their voice. And so I would just encourage coaches that maybe those in mid-career or just starting, the ones I've spoken with at the end of their career, they look back and the fact that they were proactive about making sure their athletes were safe was as rewarding as any win or any individual accomplishment of any athlete.
Sheldon, thank you. And oftentimes, as I deal with teenagers, I love opening the door right from the beginning. And maybe this is my closing thought as I listen to this, just to tell kids, you have your team for the first time and, hey, we're going to do a lot together. We're going to learn to play some baseball together. We're going to win together. We're going to lose together. We're going to laugh together. We're going to cry together. I can't wait for this experience. I just want you to know something else as well. I love you. I love you. And I'm another person in your life that if you ever need anything, if anything wrong is going on in your life, anything you need help with that I could help with, I want you to know I'm one more adult in your life that will help you if you're ever in trouble or in need. And I just want you to know you can trust me with that. So if anyone's ever needing anything, please know I feel like that's one of my most important roles as your coach. So let's have a great season. You know, even opening that door from the beginning will help maybe some kids approach that have wanted to approach people for years, but haven't had the opportunity. But if there is a kid that was struggling through with some of the things we've been talking about or other things that we've talked about with you in the past, suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, these things, opening that door might save a life and help a kid. And so I sure appreciate you being willing to address these topics with us and help us to help others.
You bet. Thank you for the invitation.
Yep. Well, thank you everybody for joining the Sportlight Podcast. Eyes up, do the work.
This has been the Sportlight Podcast from Especially for Athletes, sponsored by Coca-Cola. You can learn more about Especially for Athletes by visiting the website at especiallyforathletes.org. You can also learn more about the book, The Sportlight, by Shad Martin and Dustin Smith at especiallyforathletes.org/book.